everyone. Welcome to Textile Talks. My name is Lucy Shaken. I'm SAQA's Communications Coordinator, and I am your host for today's Textile Talk. Hi to everyone in the chat. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. I saw UK, Wales, Sweden, Mexico, Albuquerque, Ohio, and a few other people in Pennsylvania. I'm calling to you today from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And welcome to everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us today. Textile Talks are brought to you by the International Quilt Museum, the Quilt Alliance, Studio Art Quilt Associates, or SAQA, that's us, and Surface Design Association. We love bringing you these free programs every week, thanks to the support of our sponsors, who you just saw, and contributions from viewers like you. If you enjoy Textile Talks, I hope you'll support this program by telling a friend about us, posting about us on social media, or supporting our work financially with a donation at SAQA.com/TT support. Even small donations of $5 or $10 a month make a huge difference, and they help keep this program going. So a huge heartfelt thank you to everyone who has donated to Textile Talks and helped keep the program running. I also want to let you know that viewers of Textile Talks get $20 off the first year of a new SAQA membership with code TALKS. That's TALKS. SAQA is a vibrant international creative community for anyone who loves art quilts, and you can learn about SAQA membership at SAQA.com/join. We'll do some really quick housekeeping here. This is a webinar, so that means that we can't see or hear you. We encourage you to use the chat box for comments and greetings, and please put your questions in the Q&A box. We should have some time to answer questions at the end of today's program. We have closed captions provided by the National Captioning Institute. You can turn these on or off by finding the CC or Live Captions button, or by going into your settings. If you have suggestions for ways we can improve or for topics you'd like to see in future Textile Talks, please let us know in the post-event survey. That should just pop up at the end of the program today. All right, today we are featuring SAQA Global Exhibition Nature's Canvas. This is a joint exhibition between SAQA and the American Association of Woodturners. The exhibition premieres this Friday at the Wingate Museum of Art in Conway, Arkansas. And if you are in the area, they are hosting an opening reception on Friday from 5 to 7. Nature's Canvas will be on view there until August 15th, and then it will continue to travel for 3 years. I'll put the current exhibition schedule in the chat later on. More venues may be added over the course of the show. We're going to start with a short slideshow of the full exhibition, and then we'll hear from 5 of the artists from both the American Association of Woodturners and SAQA. So today we have Michael Anderson, Andrea Finch, Betty Scarpino, Terri Shinn, and Janine Wang. All right, without any further introduction, I'm going to play the exhibition slideshow. Enjoy. All right. So that is the um, exhibition. And I just want to say, if anyone is experiencing echoing, try exiting and rejoining. Don't worry, whatever you're hearing on your end isn't affecting anyone else's audio. So feel free to stick around and keep troubleshooting. Um, our first artist is Michael Anderson, so I'd like to invite Michael to join me on screen now. Hey, Michael. While Michael gets his screen share up, I'm going to read a short introduction. Michael Anderson began wood turning shortly after the birth of his first son in 2021 as a way to spend more time at home with family. And what started as a practical hobby quickly became a meaningful creative pursuit. He enjoys transforming ideas into tangible objects that can be seen, felt, and experienced. Wood is an ideal medium because of its endless variety in color, grain, texture, scent, and density. Sometimes Michael highlights the natural beauty of the material, while other times the wood serves as a canvas for personal expression. Through wood turning, Michael has found a creative outlet that allows him to express himself, work with remarkable materials, and connect with a wider audience. All right, thanks, Michael. Take it away.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. And hi, everyone I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm currently in Columbus, Ohio, and I wanted to talk about the piece that I made for this exhibition, a teapot I titled Bon Moi Renaissance. A lot of my work is colorful. Like Lucy mentioned, I mix wood with a lot of bold colors and techniques, and I like the complements and contrasts that you get with natural versus artificial and beyond the narrative that most pieces have. I think they're fun to look at and play with. And in that same vein, the teapot is really colorful that I made. I have a slide here for the quilters, and we're in a mixed audience. I just finished up this last piece. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, like I mentioned, collaborating with a wood artist, Neil Donovan, and we've made a few of these pieces. We call these our quilts. And you guys have a first look at this pretty large one, around 3 feet square, that we just finished a couple of hours ago. So let's talk about my teapot. And I want to walk through the process of making the teapot and give everyone that might not be familiar with this type of woodcraft an insight into what goes on. Wood turning in general is largely subtractive. We start with a chunk of wood and reduce it to smaller components, but something like this that has around 8 or 9 different pieces, there's a little bit of an additive aspect to it. So with this teapot, I like this style called Bon Moi, and it was popularized in the Qing Dynasty a few hundred years ago. A Bon Moi tactile, and I like it because it has this round that's contrasted with a flat base. I started with just a board of lumber. This is sapele lumber, which is pretty heavy and dense, and I made a mock-up out of paper with the dimensions that I wanted in all the different components. So you can see this paper starts to the project, and this is just a drawing of a different teapot that I was working on. So the first part is turning the body, and you can see I started with that board, and then I put that on a lathe. And if you don't know what a wood lathe is, it's just a pretty powerful tool that spins wood around really quickly. And I hold up a sharp tool to that spinning piece of wood, and I can change its shape. So going from that board to half of a circle like this, I created 2 of these. I glued them together, and in this middle image, you can see I changed the axis, so I needed to create a hole for the lid. The fun thing about wood turning is problem solving, and you have the ability to mount the piece of wood on the lathe in different ways to make different types of cuts. So a lot of this project was turning the components, and you'll see in a little bit, I colored, wood burned, carved, and a bunch of other stuff. So after I had the body and the lid, I needed to make the other components. So for making the spout, which is hollow, this whole teapot is hollow. If I had an epoxy or some sort of protective coating on the interior, it could be functional, but it's just a piece of art, something nice to look at. But making the spout and the handles started with turning a piece of wood on the lathe to get my basic template, and then I carved this into the shape of the spout that you can see right here using a number of rotary carving burrs, which these are just spinning pieces of metal that take away wood with different profiles. Making the lid for the handle, I just created this donut shape. We call it a torus, and I cut that in half. And for the handles, the spout, I use the teapot body itself as a sanding template so I can make curves match up and make it easier to glue the pieces. You can see the handle right here started as a piece of paper, and I cut that out on what we call a scroll saw to get the shape, and then I carved it so it would be more round and a little bit better in the hands. So following that, I needed to make the most stressful cuts, which is taking that body that I made and cutting it into the bonwash shape. And I did that with a fine cut saw by hand. And after that, I cut a piece of plywood for my base here. Wood has a tendency to warp with different conditions. If it's really humid or versus really dry in one area, the wood will change shape. With plywood, like this bottom piece that you see right here, it doesn't really warp. So I needed a flat base and I used plywood for that rather than just another piece of flat wood. All of the components were connected to the teapot body with these little dowels, and that just makes it more secure in the end. And even if there's a little bit of wood movement, I have a pretty tight connection where it's not going to mess up the paint or the wood burning or anything like that. So following that, I had the teapot body and I needed to start designing this pattern. I wanted this to look sort of like a crackle pattern that you can get with some ceramics, but like more of an eggshell crackle rather than a crackle, if that makes sense. So I drew on the lines with a pencil and I used a fine wood burning tip. This is a skew shape, so it's at an angle or it's askew. And I burned a bunch of lines and then filled in those lines with smaller little burned sections. You can see here, I burned the body first in this right image, then I attached the handle of the lid and burned that to complement and to follow those same lines. So it was a very stepwise process. And in the end, I have the entire structure burned. Aside from these panels that you saw in the original picture that were wood, to get those wooden panels, I just removed some of the surface with a tool called a router. And it's easy enough on a flat surface. You can see in this left image right here, I just have it, the teapot clamped down and the router just spins a metal blade really quickly and it hogs out or digs out wood. But on a curved surface, it's a little bit more challenging. So I made a base to this router that was curved in the same way as the teapot. This is the bottom portion of the teapot. That's just a waste piece. And I used that to create this template so I could route on the rounded edges of the teapot at the depth that would meet these side pieces. So it almost looks like you have this wooden teapot that's sheathed with a ceramic coat. Following that, I ebonized or blackened the entire surface with India ink to give me a nice base coat for the painting. And then with painting, I use mostly dry brushing techniques where I take a paintbrush and I remove most of the wood, or most of the paint from the paintbrush, and then just lightly sweep across the surface, usually starting with darker tones. So instead of black, I started with, or I had that black base, and then I started with dark violets and fuchsia, and then slowly layered this in a way that sort of looks like the rock hue pottery process where you have heat that transforms ceramic glaze into a bunch of wonderful random colors. My favorite type of palette is just a simple paper plate. It works really well. It's disposable, and I think the paper plate helps soak up a little bit of the extra water from the acrylic paints that I mostly use. And that's the process for making my teapot. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you're excited about this and everyone else's pieces as I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I love that we decided to start with Michael, which happened sort of by chance because his process introduces those of us who are not familiar with wood turning to some of those basic techniques that go into the creation of these gorgeous sculptures. So thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Lucy.
Um, Thank you. Yeah, next up is Andrea Finch. So welcome, Andrea. I'll ask you to come on screen now and get your screen share going while I read your introduction here. Andrea Finch, once a flat quilter, Andrea creates botanical sculptural quilts, exploring textile textures. She has let go of the rules, allowing fabric to speak through texture, color, and design. She lives and works in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and she is a juried SAQA artist and a Pennsylvania regional rep. She sits on the board and exhibitions committee of the Virginia Quilt Museum, and at the moment she has 4 pieces traveling in SAQA Global exhibitions. Wow. Some other notable exhibitions her work has been shown at include Fiber Reimagined, interpretations at the Visions Textile Museum, Fantastic Fibers at the Yeiser Art Center, Art Quilt Elements here in Pennsylvania, the International Fiber Show 12 at Sebastopol, California, and Fiber Options at Maryland Federations of Art, No Boundaries at the Virginia Quilt Museum, Form Not Function, Quilt Art at the Carnegie, and Fiber National at the Workhouse. Andrea, thanks so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you for having me here. Once I was a flat quilter. I have found freedom in the 3D form. Is it moving? There we go. The vessels are part of a series inspired by the lines in the farmers' fields in rural Pennsylvania, and my slides are not moving correctly. Let me reshare. Sorry
Let's
about that.
try it again, and if not, we can switch over to my screen, Andrea.
There we go. Okay. The vessels are part of a series inspired by the lines in the farmers' fields in rural Franklin County in south central Pennsylvania, where I live. This is sorry. During the winter months, I am drawn to the lines of the farmers' fields in their lines that the farmers leave in their fields. Lines of winter cover crops or the plastic covered rows used to minimize the use of weed killers. As part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, farmers are working to reduce runoff and chemicals to improve the life of the Chesapeake Bay region. While I made the vessels in 2025, the idea started with this quilt I made a decade before. I don't confine myself to traditional quilt fabrics, loving the texture and body of upholstery textiles. I always create way more fabric than I will ever use. Using the cutoffs from the previous piece, I made another for a fundraiser for the Land Conservancy of Adams County, Pennsylvania. Then I made this triptych, starting with the cutoffs from the two previous pieces. I never throw anything away. I sold the centerpiece, donated one, and the last piece sat in my studio for years. When I started making vessels, I knew exactly what to do with it. The vessels are created with reclaimed and other textiles, cotton batting, and lots of thread. Reusing textiles discarded by decorators, I create with small bits of ephemeral fabrics. Once used, I cannot replace them. Textile production is a resource-intensive industry. The more I keep out of the landfills, the more at peace I feel with my chosen medium. I machine raw edge applique, then machine quilted the fabrics to create the design. Then hand and machine sewed them together to construct the form. The pieces are finished with cork fabric covered cardboard cake circles that are hand sewn to the bottom to give the vessel stability. For years, I'd been creating flowers. One day, while working with the petals, I realized that they were the right shape to turn into a vessel. Still experimenting with many forms, letting the fabrics tell me how to use them. The red leaf vessel in the center bottom was my first. I had great hopes to do many of them, but they are very time consuming, and I ended up with carpal tunnel from the beadwork along the edges of the leaves. The red leaf vessel is now coming back to me after traveling for 3 years in SAQA's global exhibition, Context in Red. How I put them together. I have a wall from floor to ceiling of reclaimed fabrics from a local decorator who has given me carloads of discontinued fabric sample books. Over the years, I've torn apart the books and sorted the fabrics by color or size. I'm given lots of textiles. I do occasionally purchase textiles, often from a source who buys excess fabric from New York's garment district. But my palette's pretty close to complete with reclaimed pieces. To create my vessels, I layer cotton batting, upholstery fabric, or old quilts in the center, with layers of more fabric on both sides. Then more and more layers of fabric and thread. The fabric goes from limp and stiff to be able to stand on its own. Using raw edge machine applique, I create the new fabric that will become the sides of the vessels, usually creating multiple pieces as I like to work in series. I sew on many layers of fabric. All the work is two-sided because both sides are seamed. Thread choice is important for both the top and the bottom. Turn up the sound to hear the buzz of my machine. And duckbill scissors are my favorite scissors to trim away. Sometimes I just pick up the scissors and start cutting. Often I do test out the forms and shapes before cutting up the fabric with paper patterns. For most of my work, I do not measure, but the sides of the vessel need to be about the same and consistent to get a nice curve for the vessel. Though sometimes I don't worry about it and I just put it together. Here comes the hard part, turning it right side out. After I've sewn the vessel together, I paint it with watered down matte medium to protect it. By turning the piece when it's wet and soft, it makes it much easier. Sometimes I have made pieces too stiff to turn, and then I must hand stitch the last side or let the seam show. I use cake circles or thin wood discs covered in fabric to make the base, then hand stitch them to the bottom of the piece. I'm not afraid of letting the guts of the quilt hang out, let the stitches show, raw edges and thread ends hang. I think of them as brush strokes. Bound edges feel too confining to me. You can find more of my art at A Finch Song Creation and on Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. And someone asked just really quick if you conduct workshops, and would they find that information also on your website as well?
I do trunk shows for local quilt guilds within a driving distance, and I'll drive pretty far, but I don't do workshops yet, or maybe never. I need to create my art. So
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. Next up, we have Betty Scarpino. So Betty, I'll invite you to come on screen and share your slides while I read your introduction. See, in 1975, Betty Scarpino wandered into a wood shop at the University of Missouri and enrolled in a beginning woodworking class just for fun. This workshop kickstarted Betty's 50-year love affair with working with wood. While learning how to make furniture, she also took sculpture and drawing classes. Equipped with a strong knowledge of process and material, Betty was well prepared to make what she envisioned beyond the constraints of a lathe. The two sculptures in this exhibit are related to, yet not confined within, their original lathe-induced roundness, and they showcase Betty's love of carving. As their titles suggest, which we'll hear in a moment, the resulting organic forms speak of the impact that nature can have on wooden structures. Betty helped spread the knowledge and joy of embellishing, carving, and deconstructing by teaching and demonstrating worldwide, as well as during her 7 years as editor of American Woodturner. Her work has received numerous awards locally and nationally, and more than 20 museums own Betty's sculptures, including the Renwick Gallery at the Smithsonian Museum of American Art, the Cincinnati Art Museum, and the Indiana State Museum. Welcome, Betty. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. And hello, everyone from Indianapolis. See if I can get this going.
Looks good.
Good. I am so pleased to have two sculptures in this exhibit. Each one began as a turned form, which I then carved. More about those pieces in a minute, but first, a bit of background. In my 50-plus years working with wood began when I took a furniture making class in 1975. During my time at university, I wandered into the art department and ended up taking several sculpture classes. I made this sculpture in 1980, about the same time I learned wood turning. This tends to be the story of my life. One thing leads to another. Even after all these years, my work has a similar look to this sculpture. Organic, abstract, figurative forms that suggest movement, connection, contrast, and relationships. For instance, just recently finished Motherlode has strikingly similar characteristics to my first wood sculpture. Unlike working with fabric, wood turning is a subtractive process. While the processes may be different, the materials share similar characteristics. Warm to the touch, organic, endless possibilities for expressing thoughts, emotions, and ideas. woven with the wind began when I was gifted a chunk of spalted hackberry. While the wood was still very wet, I turned a bowl form and set it aside. Several years later, when I decided to proceed further, the bowl had warped so much that the only viable option for finishing the inside was either hand sanding or somehow covering up the tool marks. Before finishing the interior, though, my adventures in artwork continued, and on a whim, I took a Jumchi paper-making workshop at Aramont School. Jumchi is a process of combining and manipulating layers of mulberry paper into strong, fabric-like sheets. The initial paper is made from the bark of mulberry trees, and the Jumchi process has been used for centuries in Korea for making clothing. Today's artists further add to and manipulate those sheets of paper for various wall hangings and 3D sculpture. During the workshop, I made several wall hangings and also made a round disc with the intention of gluing it into the hackberry bowl's interior. That's the one on the right. This material seemed a perfect organic fit. Unfortunately, or maybe I should say fortunately, my skill set and knowledge was not up to the task, so that Jumchi round became a standalone wall sculpture. To mimic growth rings, I used a turned board to emboss concentric rings into the paper and then manipulated the edges to look like tree bark. Voila! An art piece made by following threads of interest and curiosity. Back to my challenge with the hackberry bowl. I had decided to paint its interior. Well, damn, that looked so awful. I ended up covering the paint with layers of torn paper. Somewhat simulating wood grain, it looked great. After about a year, though, the glue joints started to peel apart. Lesson learned? Never glue paper onto dry acrylic paint. What a mess, but still worth saving. Painstakingly, I removed all the paper, glue, paint, bought more fiber paper, and started over. Tidal Wave, the other piece in the show, it's a wall hanging, had a few adventures of its own. After languishing in a gallery, I called it back home. The carving needed to be bolder, more defined. A dye job, too, from bleached blonde to stunning redhead with gold highlights. I've never colored my own hair, but I delight in transforming wood grain, which points to yet another similarity between wood and fabric: receptiveness to coloring, texture, and texturing raw materials. I enjoy working with the uncertainty of outcome, although admittedly I don't usually have quite so many detours. It is true, though, rarely do I have a conscious idea of how I will proceed from start to finish. Over the course of several months, as illustrated by this series of images, I birthed a sculpture. After chalking a quick outline of a possible form onto a huge chunk of walnut, I made a few rough cuts using the bandsaw. The bandsaw is that machine right here. And I made these cuts along the chalk line. And there are the pieces that I cut off. The resulting form suggested I was heading in a positive direction. As I carved away more wood, I paid attention to what was developing, noticing possible relationships, pathways to connect forms. I'm comfortable with the process of discovering what my hands are tooling rather than my mind dictating. When my hands get carried away, for instance, this sculpture decided it wanted negative spaces, not something I originally planned. Oops. I carved completely through the sculpture. The first carving through happened right in here, and then I decided I needed another negative space, so I carved that in there. After hating myself for a few minutes, I proceeded to fix the mistake. Gracing the cover of Nature's Canvas catalog, Michael's teapot and Jean Howard's quilt, paired together, visually expresses the many connections shared between turned wood and art quilts. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty. I had a comment in the audience that I thought was pretty funny. She said, so interesting you took something back from a gallery to keep working on it. That's kind of mind-blowing to me. And I would agree. I think that's great. And we love the finished product, the reformed product. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Terri Shinn. Terri Shinn resides in Snohomish, Washington, and her work has been featured in numerous books, regional, national, and international shows, and has been included in private and public collections. Terri views experimentation as an essential part of her process and looks to her sense of humor and outlook on life for inspiration. Terri especially enjoys the discovery process as she plays with various materials, experiments with different textures, and tackles new techniques. Terri's solo exhibition, Beneath the Boughs, is on view at the Pacific Northwest Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum in La Conner, Washington, until July 26th. Welcome, Terri.
Hey, thank you so much.
I'm going to get your slides up here. And
I
here we
just
go.
wanted to say that I am so thrilled to be part of this this exhibition. It's quite remarkable with the woodturners and the quilters. I just think the combination is fabulous. So thank you to Textile Talks for inviting me. I started my journey a long, long time ago, probably when I was 18. And my very first quilt, we're talking about flat quilts, was a velvet and satin quilt because that was the thing we were doing, water beds and the velvet quilts. Well, that bed or that quilt wouldn't stay on the bed. It would just keep sliding off. So I drag it around to talks every once in a while to show that's my first project. But I quickly decided that my real interest is texture, and I've been searching and searching for a long time, trying to find my way to add as much texture as I could. And we'll go to the next slide. I made this, and it is based on the bristlecone pine that is in the Sierra Nevadas, up at about the 8,000 or 9,000 foot level. And it just grabbed my attention because it was so contorted and twisted. And I was just trying to figure out a way to interpret that in my textiles. Everything is hand dyed. There's a lot of hand machine stitching too, but tons of cording, tons of wire, armature. The dark in the center is me trying to emulate a stump that had been hit by a little bit of fire. It didn't destroy the tree, but it just left its mark. I spent 1,800 hours on this piece. I loved every bit of it, but I realized quickly that this was too much labor-intensive projects for me to keep going. On the right-hand side, you can see a rock or several rocks. There's a funny story about it. They are basically made by collaging fabric around a real rock that has been wrapped with plastic and using a thin glue over top and letting it dry, cutting around it like a clam and opening it up and bringing out the rock and then stitching it. Well, you can imagine it's not very heavy. So it was asked to go to Brazil for several shows. And the courier, I mailed it to Florida, and the courier was taking it on down to Sao Paulo. And I got a message from the curator saying, "I'm so sorry we couldn't take your rocks in because we can't take foreign minerals into another country, into our country. And I just laughed and said, did he bother picking them up? Because I think there's 12 of them and they couldn't weigh more than a half a pound in total. So they had to get shipped later. So next slide. This is Methuselah again, and it got stuck during the pandemic and went from gallery to gallery. And this was my favorite piece or slide from the shows. It was sitting in a gallery right above Ipanema Beach. And I thought, oh, what a wonderful, wonderful location. Next. And then during the pandemic, I started trying to figure out my new direction, I think like everyone did, and realizing back through all the decades that I'd been working on textiles, trees kept coming up. And I tried to come up with a design that I could just do bark. And this is how I start this Persian ironwood, which is a tree that is from northern Iran and the Caucasus. Sorry about that. I get my inspiration from several sources. Beautiful, beautiful table books, and also friends that go hiking and traveling will send me gorgeous, gorgeous pictures for inspiration. So next. To start each piece, I make a cartoon, I call it, in paper, just to see how the design will look from every angle, what it will look like at different heights, and making sure that the back lines up, the designs come together in the back. Next. I've started doing gravitational ice dyeing, which is just so much fun, but I can only do it during the summer by using 2 ladders with a beam and wrapping fabric around it or using clamps to let it hang. These are soda ash fabric, and I add ice on top and then sprinkle the dye. And I sit in my lawn chair and watch the neighbors trying to figure out their comments as they're walking by. I'm just giggling. It's just so much fun to watch that dye just drip down into tubs and watch it change. And I will add another color or just play for 2 weeks. It's total therapy. Think next slide. And these are a few of the pieces I do. And I'm not so worried about a consistency in color because what I do, I cut out sections of it. So from one single piece of fabric, I might be able to get 5 or 6 different colorations and put them into 6 or 7 different pieces. Next. I started this piece out, and well, I start all of them out flat. And I use an interfacing as the background. This particular bark was very textured, and so each of the pieces was cut out with another layer of interfacing and a cotton fabric on top. I machine stitched it, started adding a bunch, and I do mean a bunch, probably hundreds of French knots sewn with some of my hand-dyed pearl cottons and linens and all different kinds of threads. And then I was able to machine stitch those down. Sometimes I can't even do it because it's so thick. I would have to hand stitch layer upon layer upon layer. So after that, the next step is I'm always consistently checking to make sure I'm liking all the sizes. So I either pen the pieces together or use clamps, and I'm checking the backs to make sure they're lining up, and I can adjust as I go. You can see that the top and the bottom are not done yet. Those are done after I have machine stitched the piece together, and just like and or sorry, Andrea was talking about turning it inside out. That is what I do, and sometimes it does get pretty thick. And then I make the lining, which is next. I try to do like the wood grain, and you can see through, and I try to copy the colors of the wood as much as possible to give that illusion. I'm trying to mimic Mother Nature as best I can. Next. And this is the finished piece. The top is hand stitched with my cotton hand dyed, and the bottom is too. And you can see some of the machine stitching and also the tons of French knots. I usually break numerous needles trying to get through them all. And next. Here are a few of the 28 that I've made so far. The one on the left is the Strangler Fig. It was all done with wrapping fabric around cording and couching it down. The next one is a mossy redwood with burls. It was screen printed with thickened dye to get the bark. And then I needle felted several layers of wool roving to start the moss, and machine stitched tiny, tiny 1-inch pieces of coral shaped moss using a water soluble fabric. And thinking I only needed maybe a couple hundred, I ended up with 1,400 that I hand stitched onto that. And at the bottom left, you can see the burl is done with wet and needle felting, and there's also a fern above it. The next one is the Himalayan white birch with just layers and layers and layers of thread painting, and the middle scarred area is also done with water-soluble fabric, with there again just layering and layering and layering, and then hand stitching it on before I've wrapped the white bark around it. The next one is the poplar with lichen, and all of the lichen is done with the water-soluble fabric and then hand stitched on. Some of the green I decided to add at the end, and I used Inktense crayons, and by applying them with a wet brush, I'm able to blend and add some coloration without adding a lot of stitch. Sometimes I even do that when I don't like the color combinations I've added in thread and I can't find the thread color. I will tone it with the Inktense.
Terri, I want to thank you so much. I wish we could go through all of these
that's
in great
okay.
detail, but I want to leave time for our last
Sure.
artist, who is Janine. And Terri, thank you so much. Your work is just totally gorgeous and stunning. I'm so glad you could be here to share it with us today.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Terri. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have Janine Wang. Janine holds an MFA in furniture design from RISD and a Bachelor of Architecture from Cooper Union. She lives and works in Corvallis and Albany, Oregon, as an assistant professor of teaching in the Wood Science and Engineering Department at Oregon State University's College of Forestry. Janine believes that furniture is a direct interface with the world, and that how we choose to furnish our lives is an empowering, beautiful way that each person gets to paint their own values on the environment. Her work exalts freedom, familiarity, and unrestricted comfort in the environment. Janine, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. It is a total pleasure to be here, and I could listen to Terri talk about those amazing tree bits all day. They're so cool. But I'm going to run through my piece that I have through in Nature's Canvas really fast because we don't have too much time, but this piece took a lot of time. It is a split turn box. Split turning is the method in wood turning where you turn a piece and then you split it apart into multiple pieces. And in this case, I'm putting them back together again. If you can see my mouse on the screen, I'm not sure that you can, but there are arrows. Each one of the four sides of this frame was turned on the lathe at the same time. And then they were split apart into four pieces, and then I rejoined them back together into the form of this frame. Split turning is a technique that I use very often. And the square form has been a pretty good sounding board to kind of explore designs and foreign language. And I thought it was a little bit like quilt squares. So I'm going to go a little bit more into depth on how it was made. Unlike the other artists, I did not take incredible process photos throughout the whole process, but I did write an article in American Woodturner in April 2024 on how to make a split turn frame. And if you want to find out more details at a slower pace, definitely go check out this article. Everything's in there. The piece that I'm making in the article is this guy on the left, which is like a cloud-inspired frame made out of a split turn piece. So to make this guy, I had to put a good deal of work into prepping the stock. The piece, you can see the pieces on the table saw right here. They have this lengthwise extra piece of wood put in there. I had to cut a lengthwise groove in order to be able to put the panel and the picture and the glass and everything in the piece at the very end. I'm actually choosing to put that groove in at the very start. But for now, don't worry about those. The idea is that I want these like four general square pieces that I'm going to glue together in a certain orientation, and then I'm going to turn it and then split it back apart. So you can see on the upper right, this is that glued up orientation. When I'm gluing, I'm actually doing a paper glue joint, which is a technique that allows you to split the joint again later. And I'm using this brown modern hide glue, which helps so much for cleaning the glue off at the very end. I've actually moved on from the hide glue to using a white, like regular Elmer's school glue, which does even better. But anyway, when I'm gluing my four main pieces together, I'm going to glue this like strip of paper in between that glue joint. And you can see in that clamped up piece on the upper right, in each one of those joints, there's a sheet of paper. Then I go ahead and I turn this whole piece on the lathe. So depending on the situation, I'll often design the piece beforehand. In this case, I drew the entire thing to scale and then put it behind my lathe so I could reference it while I was working. I knew I wanted this like super beaded cloud effect because I knew what I wanted to frame in the frame. So I drew it, marked all my lines, and then turned everything to shape. On the upper right, I included this photo because you have to really, really precisely put that center mark into that piece. Otherwise, all of your dimensions get off. So after the piece is turned, it's time to split it. The way that I do that is I'll stick a chisel right into the end grain of the piece and then give it a little bit of a tap. That causes the paper inside of the glue joint to like rip apart. And you can see it on the upper right here. There's like the residue of the paper that was inside of that joint. I like to put a little hair tie around the whole thing so that when I'm splitting pieces, they don't just explode all over the place. And I actually paper jointed all of the waste pieces into the main four pieces too. So I'm actually able to split all of that waste wood off, and then I have these perfect grooves that are ready for the panel. And you can see later on here, if I need to split something further or do a really delicate job of splitting, I'll use wooden wedges so I don't damage the wood. Any water-soluble glues like Titebond hide glue can actually be washed off with some warm water. If you can't wet your entire piece, you can actually just go ahead and put a flat piece of sandpaper down on a board and sand it all off. Once I have my four main pieces, I'm going ahead and trimming those miters so that I can glue all four together and then gluing it up. So once it's glued up, because of the nature of wood, those end grain, like the end of a board, should not be glued to the other end of the board. It's not a structural joint, so I have to add these extra splines into the corners. And this is my table saw setup for that. And then in between here and this slide and the last one, I've actually whitewashed and bleached every one of the pieces, and then I can assemble my frame. So it's a pretty craft heavy and like really technical process, but I wanted to fly through all of this just to share a little bit about my design process at the end. We think about like woodworkers or craftspeople as just like, I don't know, it's just you and the chisel and like a beautiful room full of hand tools. But we are living in 2026, and in reality, a lot of studios look more like this, where we can kind of pair digital tools with the handwork that's needed, and let the two inform each other. So here I have Fusion 360, and this is a video. On the left is a whole bunch of different designs, but because of the time-consuming nature of this process, and I know a couple of the artists that went up beforehand understand this too, you just can't do it all in the time that you have. So 3D modeling is a really great way of kind of previewing and helping you choose what you're going to invest your time in, and then make sure you make no mistakes. So in this case, I've set up a Fusion model, a template where I can see the turning that I need to do, and also the frame and the design that's going to come out. Fusion is a parametric modeling system, which means that it's able to, you can tell it rules, and then you can change your design within those rules, and it'll show you live. So in this case, if I know I want to put a panel into this, that starts messing with my tolerances and my actual design. I've pre-modeled the panel into this guy, and I think I'm going to show this, but the panel, because it takes up a certain depth, actually changes the profile of the turning that you can see. So if I zoom really close in there and I make the panel, it actually takes away some of the turn surface. And in this case, this is a really great way for me to check that the design that I'm going to do and the curve and profile that I've chosen is going to work with the panel. I'm going to let myself, my past self, change the design a little bit here so you can just see a little of what I mean. And yeah, it's such a quick way for me to be able to do all of these designs and make sure that they actually look like what it looks like in my head. You can see the panel would never work in this case. There's not enough material left over. But yeah, that's it. Thank you. Oops.
Janine, thank you so much. One of the things that I've enjoyed about this group of artists in this presentation is the ways that their processes are similar across media, and also the ways that their processes are really, really different. We are running up on the top of the hour. I want to invite all of our artists back on screen, and I'm just going to ask one round of questions. We can go a few minutes over our time today. I just wanted to start with the question for all of you. What appealed to you about this exhibition? Why did you want your work in conversation with this other medium? So Betty, you're first on my screen. Could I start with you?
Okay. Well, as I said in my presentation, it's the organic nature of it. So wood is a very organic material, as is fabric. And I was especially pleased that there was no date involved. In other words, we could take work from as far back as we wanted to go ahead and enter it into the competition, which is why I ended up with the two pieces that are in the show.
Great, thank you. Andrea?
All my work is botanically based. So this was perfect for me. When I saw the call come up, I was just so thrilled. And I love wood. My father was a woodworker, and I am bad when I get into a show that has wood. I can't keep my hands off of it. As much as I can't stop touching fabric, I love wood.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, well, nature is everything, and I think the opportunity to have a show that's nature themed is really attractive. I'm outside as much as I can be, but beyond that, I think, as a wood turner, most of our pieces and exhibits are surrounded by wood. So I think it's really cool to have another medium and, like 50-50 split between wood and textiles. And like Betty said, they're both organic and complement each other so well. It's just super exciting.
Janine, what about you?
I think I was mostly drawn to the cross-disciplinary nature of this show. If I hadn't become a wood turner, I would have totally become an upholsterer instead. And I've been living in the Pacific North. Well, I just moved to the Pacific Northwest in fall of 24, and I picked up spinning and I got myself a loom, and I think I'm going to launch right back into it and learn this new form too.
Very cool. Well, we'll all look forward to seeing what you end up making. And Terry, how about you?
I guess mine's a little more personal. My grandfather was a carpenter, and I remember that wonderful smell of the sawdust. And my grandmother was a quilter, and I just somehow the two, it was like I was paying kind of an homage to them.
I love that answer. Yeah, there really is something about wood and textiles that gives us all of those generational family associations. We really want to touch both mediums. There's that hardness and softness and the smoothness of the wood and the wrinkles of the fabric. I think this show is really fantastic. And thank you all so much for being a part of it and for talking about your work here on Textile Talks today. I learned so much about wood turning. I learned so much about quilted vessels, and all of your work is just stunning. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our audience, thank you so much for being here and watching with us today. We're here every week, and as always, you can find all the info about Textile Talks and our archive of over 250 recordings. Now, I think just about 300 recordings at SAQA.com/Textile Talks. If you enjoy Textile Talks, once again, we would love it if you would tell a friend about us, post about us on social media, or consider supporting our work financially with a donation at SAQA.com/TT support. Don't forget, viewers of Textile Talks can get $20 off the first year of a new SAQA membership with code TALKS. That's TALKS. And if you love art quilts, we would love to have you join SAQA. Next week's Textile Talk is Veronica Olivier, Stitched and Painted, and that is also presented by SAQA, so I'll see you again next week. I hope you all have a fantastic Wednesday. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.